Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about what we're going to cover during the training today. We'll first talk about CAD functionality. That stands for Computer Aided Dispatch, and that is the functionality that you will be able to see on the dispatcher side, where you can look at the runs for the day, see where the vehicles are, what stops they have upcoming, and so forth. We will next turn to the AVL functionality. That's AVL is commonly used for automated vehicle location, but it's basically the driver app that Clint mentioned earlier. So that is the tablet-based application that drivers will be able to use as they step through the manifest for a given run and update the status of different elements of the manifest, such as picking up a passenger or dropping them off or arriving back at the garage. Third, we will talk about the various ways in which RidePilot and CAD and the AVL or driver app all interact with one another. So we'll do some sort of interactive demonstrations where you'll see first what's happening on the RidePilot or CAD side, and then we'll jump over and look at the AVL and see how that communication is happening and how the interaction is unfolding. And then finally, we will look at some of the provider settings that you have for configuring the CAD and AVL components to work the way you want to. There's not a lot, but there are a few that will help sort of govern how those behave for you. So starting with the first element of that, we're going to take a look at CAD functionality. For these in general, I'll use the PowerPoint to just sort of tick off the areas that we're going to try and cover, and then I'll jump over into either RidePilot or the driver app, and we'll start looking at the items. So with CAD, we'll talk about how you access the CAD screen, give an overview of the layout of the CAD screen, then talk about how you can filter what runs you want to see by date, and also looking at the runs, all runs on a day versus just the runs that have still yet to be completed. Then we'll look at how you can select which runs you want to show on the map, and how you can expand a run to show all of the trips that are part of that, and then how you can choose and toggle whether you want to look at the upcoming path or prior path or all of the stops that are associated with the different runs. So with that said, I'm now going to jump over into the RidePilot app. Okay, and so this is the user acceptance testing version of the application. So this was previously being used by Tuella County, among others. So I'm going to look at just a little bit of their old data because it's more realistic than what I have for some of the tests that I've set up. But very shortly, we'll jump over then to look at some of the dummy data that we've entered to show particular features. But first off, let's talk about how you get to the CAD screen. So if you look across the tabs, across the top of RidePilot, these are organized as they have been, but now you'll see a new one at the end that says CAD AVL. And if you click on that, it will open up in a separate browser tab, the CAD window. And what's nice about having a separate browser tab is if you have a 2-monitor setup, you can take one of those tabs and drag it over to a separate monitor so that you can have the main RidePilot application open on one monitor and be looking at the CAD screen on a different monitor, if that's helpful. So briefly, how this is organized, on the left, you first of all have a place where you can select what date you want to look at, and this will default to the current date, but you can also go back and look at historical CAD runs or historical run data using the CAD system, or you could look forward at what is going to happen in future days. Over in the right, you have the provider that is currently selected, and because I'm an admin, I can jump around and look at different providers. But if you're a single provider, that will end up being your provider that shows up there. Down below the date, it first lists all of the runs for the date, and then below that, it asks what would you like to show for the selected runs. So you can for the runs, you can have this list either show all of the runs on the day or the incomplete runs only. Because this is Tuella data and it was on the user acceptance testing version of the software, and they have now jumped over to the production version, none of these are completed. So what you're seeing is identical for all runs and incompleted runs, but in actual use as you're going through the day, if you switch to incomplete only, then you'll only be seeing within this list the runs that are still pending for the day. Now, by selecting individual runs, this is choosing what you want to show, and then down below, we'll show what you see for each run. So what I want to do is jump back to an earlier date where there actually is some run data when Tuella was using this. So I'm going to go back to September 10th. And here on my list, I'm also going to drag the map over so that I can see Tuella. Did I go too far? Okay, there we are. So I mentioned that you can choose to select all of the runs, or you can individually select runs that you want to look at. Because this is an older date for the selected runs, there's no longer a show upcoming path because all of this is in the past, but we can still look at what happened on previously. So what you'll see right here, these gray, this traces out where the vehicles have gone, and I've selected prior path and I've selected shuffle 1 and shuffle 2. So it's showing me 2 different runs. I can also choose to add where the pickups and the drop-offs are. If I click down to just a single run, you'll see that you can focus in on just one run rather than 2. If you turn all of them on, you know, it can end up being a fairly messy map to try to figure out. So you can look at as many or as few runs as you would like at once. What I'm going to do at this point is jump over to a different provider, the test provider, and some sort of test runs that I have set up to just show you a couple more things. So we're now using AT Provider. Because I need to interact with the driver app and because I'm located in San Diego, I actually planned out some trips that are also in that area so that we can see the vehicle showing up in the same place as the run. So I'm going to just zoom way out for a little bit, then recenter on San Diego here. So when my colleague Judong, who developed this and is based in our New York City office, does the demos, we get to learn a little bit more about the geography of New York City. So now we'll get to a little bit of the geography around here in San Diego. So I'm going to now also jump forward to the current date. And let's see. We will see that we have a few runs here. We can look at the all runs and the incompleted runs is the same because I haven't completed any of these just yet. But now what you'll see is in addition to there being, oh, the map jumped back somehow. Just a moment. I think it did that when I changed the date. So one moment here. There, and let's select all. Okay, so now what we're seeing here is we have a couple of runs selected with their upcoming paths. I can also choose to show the pickups and the drop-offs. So I have, you know, one run that's sort of doing a big loop around the area, and then another that is doing a couple pickups and drop-offs right along the coast there. So let's see. So that is, in general, how the CAD screen will work. And when you have drivers who are logged in, and you'll see this in a little bit, you'll see their when they are driving around, you will also see their vehicle locations on the map, in addition to just seeing the actual routes. I guess one final thing to note is in the prior runs from Tuella that I was showing, you saw them marked in gray. In this one, you see the routes shown in blue. And that's basically just the difference between what's already happened and what is still upcoming. The blue is still upcoming. So we're going to jump over and do some things with the AVL here in just a moment, but let me pause for a second and see if there are any questions with what we've been looking at so far with the CAD. Okay, so let me add just a couple final notes that I neglected to say earlier. You'll see next to the runs that there are a few buttons. One of them is this little down arrow, and if you want to do that, you can open it up and you will see the sequence of stops, and as you hover over each one, you'll see where that's located. So that's a good way to visually make sense of the run and see what's going on. You can, if you click on this, it will recenter on the run that you have selected. And then finally, this is a little chat button. There's some functionality that we'll come back to later when we talk about the interactions between RidePilot and the driver app. And one of those is an interactive chat feature, and this is how you access this from the dispatcher side. Okay. Let me continue here and jump on over to the PowerPoint again. Clint, can you just confirm that y'all are still with me, since I'm not hearing any comments?
Yeah, we're here.
We're still here.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so let's go to the next one and talk about the AVL. And I'm briefly, so what we're gonna look at on the AVL side is how you access that, and that includes how you go get it in the Google Play Store and load it onto your Android device, and then how you open it up and log into it. And then I'll show briefly, there's you know, what it mainly does is help drivers walk through a manifest and fill in the information necessary to update the status as they pick up and drop off passengers. There's additionally a side menu that provides a few extra items, the chat functionality I was just mentioning, sort of an emergency alert to send to the dispatcher, and then a little bit about the application and the ability to sign out after you logged in. And then we'll go over the general workflow, which basically involves a driver logging in and then selecting a run that they're ready to do, doing some pre-run data entry, stepping through a series of pickups and drop-offs, and then doing post-run data entry. So let me, at this point, I'm going to try and switch over to the to my tablet here. So give me one moment. All right. So actually, okay. So the first thing I wanted to say is that when you're ready to have your drivers, or if you are a driver, when you're ready to download that app, you can go to the Google Play Store and look up Ride AVL, and you will find the application. I believe it's the top one that you want. And then you can download that, and you're pretty much ready to go, assuming that you have a user login already. And I believe it's the case that all the drivers are already associated with user accounts and have usernames and login passwords. And so that's what you'll use. So let me jump over now to the application. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and fill in a driver name. Okay, so as soon as I have logged in, then what the application is going to do is it's going to bring up your runs for today. So, and as I mentioned, and we'll go through this in just a little bit, the general process is that you would select a run, and then the application will lead you through a series of steps required to complete the run that you would fill in as you actually perform it. But before we do that, I mentioned earlier, there's a little menu. It's the hamburger menu in the upper right. And if I click on that, you'll see that a few items come up. So one of those is the chat functionality. That's how you access chat from the driver side. Right below that is an emergency call, and it's akin to having sort of a silent alarm. You don't enter in any information. You just need to hit emergency, and an immediate notification will go out to dispatcher that you are reporting an emergency, and then they'll try and follow up with you and find out what's going on and what sort of help is needed. And then you can look about this app and also do a sign out. So that's quickly a little bit of information about the app and some of the things that it offers and how you access it. I now want to go back to the slideshow. So I'm gonna pass back control to my computer, and we'll look at that, and then we'll come back to this and actually go through the process of filling in a trip. So let me take control back here. Okay. All right, so this is now in just a little bit more detail what the workflow looks like when you are using the driver app to step through a run. So you're going to select a run, and we hadn't done that when I left the app just a moment ago, but that would be the next step. And then once you've selected that, there's going to be a whole series of items that includes all of the pickups and drop-offs. But in addition to that, it includes an initial screen which has a pre-run inspection where you have to step through and answer some questions as well as enter the odometer. And then for the series of pickups and drop-offs that you make, you'll step through the same sort of sub-steps for each one. You'll indicate your departure. You can take a look at the ETA, which is going to be based on where you're located, and the estimated travel time versus whatever the schedule says. And it'll help you with color displays know whether you're running ahead or behind schedule on that. There's the ability to select an arrow, which will jump you over into a navigation app. If you have multiple apps, you can choose which one you want to use. But that will take the information about where you are, where you're going, and preload the navigation app to help you if you don't know where you're going. Then once you get to the location, you'll indicate the time that you arrive, and then you'll indicate what the result was, whether if you're trying to pick a passenger up, you can indicate whether in fact you successfully picked them up or whether they were a no-show. Or if you're dropping somebody off, you can indicate that that's what happened. At some point, either at pickup or at drop-off, and that's a configurable item, you can be prompted to enter the fare or the donation that was collected, and then proceed to the next stop. And then finally, once you've done the final drop-off, you'll go to a final step, which is ending the run when you arrive at the garage, and then there you can enter a final odometer reading. So I think I'll go and jump back now to the driver app, and we can see what that looks like. And then we can feel free to interject with questions as we go, or I'll pause again to ask if there are any questions once we've looked at that. All right, can someone confirm that y'all are seeing the AVL app again?
We are. And can I just interject something real quick, Paul?
Yeah, go for it, Clint.
Just a reminder to everyone, this app is only available on an Android device. We do not have an Apple or iOS version available at this point.
Thanks, Clint. That's a good reminder. Okay, so I'm just gonna step through the workflow that I just described. So here again, the driver has just logged on and they see the runs that they have for the day. And when they click on one, then the next screen is gonna, now the top of the screen shows you that you're in the Recur Coastal Morning Run manifest. And basically the next thing that you have to do is going to be shown in the slightly darker blue. So that in this case, that is the pre-vehicle inspection. So I'll just tap on that. I'm sorry, I don't think that you see the taps when I'm doing that, but I tapped on the dark blue at the top. And now it shows that I am in the pre-run vehicle inspection stage. And you'll see that there's several questions. These questions are for the vehicle inspection that should be happening at the beginning of the run. And you all will have the chance to choose what specific questions you want to ask. We'll go over that a little bit later on in the training. So you basically just say yes or no for each of those. So if I hit the green check mark, it means, yeah, it's gassed up and there are no warning lights. I also can enter driver notes that could be pulled up later. And then finally, it prompts you to enter the odometer information. So let's say that we're starting here with 600 miles on it. So you'll notice once I've finally entered those and filled in the odometer, that start run button, which had been faded out, is now dark and I can select it. And I'm ready to begin. And it says, okay, we're ready. Your first trip is going to be to pick somebody up at 659 South Cedros. Yes.
Sorry, before you go on, where can you see those driver notes? I don't think I've actually been told that. If a driver inputs notes into that, where do they show up for the dispatchers to see?
I think it's in the run, but I will have to get back onto you. I haven't exercised that functionality myself, but I think it's in the run. Clint, do you know the answer to that question?
Not off the top of my head, but I'm going to look it up now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should be able to answer that, but I don't have that answer for you offhand. But we can get it. If Clint can't find it, then I can send a message to Zhidong and then send that out to the group afterwards. Okay, so so the next step is basically just to indicate that you are now ready to depart for the first pickup, and so you'll have a depart. The mobility notes are based on the customer that you're going to be picking up, and anything that was added either for that customer or for the trip for the customer. So it'll pull those in there, and then you hit depart. Whoops. Okay, so what this says is what you'll notice is there's a general pattern on these screens that says when you do one action, it will take you to the next action, but it will also put a big red undo button. So if I accidentally hit depart and I hadn't departed yet, it will say, you just marked down that you departed at 9:28. Undo this if you didn't mean to do that. I did mean to do that, so I don't need to do that right now. And then the next thing that I will need to mark is once I have actually arrived at the passenger's or at the customer's location. I would mark that. But what I want to note at this point is whenever you have indicated that you're ready to depart and you're embarking on a leg of the journey, that triangle in the upper right will appear, and that's the link that you can use to jump over to a navigation app on your device. So I will do that right here. And what you'll see is that it's going to bring up Google Maps in my case, because that's the app that I have loaded here. And it will know it will be using my current location. And it will be marking, you know, what it's going to take to go to where I need to do the pickup. So you see on the card that's over to the east side of Highway 5, and it's suggesting one route to get down to make the pickup. And then I can use that for as long as I like. But when I'm ready, I can just select to go back into the driver app right here. And at this point, the next thing I will be asked to, or what the app is going to wait for me to do, is to indicate that I've arrived. So I'll click on the Arrived button, and now it'll say, hey, you have arrived at 9:30. And I, again, as I mentioned, can undo that if I would like. And at this point, I have the opportunity to indicate that I picked the passenger up or that there was a no-show. Let me note one quick thing before I continue on with that step, though, is I forgot to mention earlier, down below at the very bottom, you will always see the current time. And then you will also see the scheduled time for whatever step you're currently on. So this was saying that I was supposed to pick this person up at 6:30, and then the ETA, you know, based on when I said that I was leaving and the route I had to go was 9:37 a.m. and it's showing me that that's 3 hours later than what the scheduled time was, and so it's highlighting that in red. I will tell you there's a little bit of weirdness going on right now because the system, parts of the system are basically using Mountain Time, but I'm in Pacific Time and I scheduled things in Pacific Time, so that's sort of further thrown off the scheduling. But in general, if you are running behind and when you're all operating in the greater Salt Lake region and all in the same time zone, that you will, you know, not tend to have things where you're, you know, running 3 hours late. But you know, broadly speaking, if you're behind a sufficient amount, it's going to show up in red. If you're running, you know, faster than you need to be, then it's going to show in green. So, okay, so the next step that I will do at this point is to indicate whether I picked that person up or whether they were a no-show. So I'm going to indicate that I picked them up. And at this point, I am asked to enter a donation amount, or I can skip that if they're not going to make the donation. So in this particular case, it's configured so that the driver would be asked for information about the donation at the time that the passenger is picked up. And you can control that, and you can indicate whether it should be noted as a fare or alternatively as a donation, in which case it's optional. And you can also indicate whether the driver should be prompted for that when the user is picked up or when the customer is picked up, or alternatively when the customer is dropped off. But in this case, we'll enter a donation. We'll say it was a $1 donation and it was collected. So I'll click on that and it'll say, hey, you collected a $1 donation at this time. Let's go to the next stop. And now it's telling me that the next stop I have is to pick up AT Customer 2 Test at 350 East Glaucus Street, Encinitas. And so again, when I'm ready, I can say, yes, let's depart. And at this point, since I'm departing now, I can choose to use the navigation map again if I would like. But at this point, I'm just going to step through the completion of the additional stops here and get us to the end of the run. So I'll say, we've arrived. And we picked up the passenger and they did a $2 donation. And I'm now proceeding to the next stop. The next stop is to drop off AT Customer 1 at 354 Santa Fe Drive. So we are departing. And
can I interrupt just a moment?
Please. Sure.
My name is Ann Workman, and I'm the coordinator up here for transportation in Davis County, Utah. And I'm just wondering, what happens if you forget to click on any of these, buttons, these arrived buttons, or, anything like that? What happens if you forget to click that? What's going to go on?
Well, so in general, you don't have the ability to go any further until you have clicked on it. So one of the things I have not shown you yet is you see there's the that manifest button that's in the upper left. If I click on that, I will go back into the manifest view, and what this will show me is that I'm in progress for dropping off AT Customer 1 at 354 Santa Fe. And it's not going to let me jump into the other steps, and it will show me that the ones before that have been completed. So, the short answer is that it basically walks you through a sequence, and it doesn't let you proceed to the next screen until you've done what you need to do where you currently are.
Okay. Yeah, I figured that. I'm just wondering if you have a bus driver who forgets to do that, picks up their passenger, proceeds on, and then realizes that they have not carried forth with these steps.
Right. So you can let's see, there's no double checking within the system to say the vehicle is exactly at where you're saying that it's at. So at any point in time, you can go back and just sort of step through these screens, and you might make a note to the dispatcher that says, I was a little bit off about when I entered those, and then you can you could conceivably go back on the RidePilot side, try and adjust all of that. But the short answer is there's nothing that forces the user to click the buttons when they're supposed to, but if they click them later than when they were supposed to, I guess the only negative is some of the timestamps will be off from what they actually were. But I think it's the case that, I think it's the case that the main thing from a reporting perspective that's critical is having sort of the start and end times, and then also the start and end odometers. Clint, do you want to jump in and comment on that?
Yeah, really the arrive and depart, that's going to be mostly for your information. I mean, as far as UTA and 5310 goes, all we're worried about is that the trips were made and then the mileage on the vehicle, which you get from the start and end of the app. So really everything in between is really for your own purposes, to track your drivers, make sure they are where they're supposed to be, and that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure thing. Okay, so we're continuing here. We're going to arrive at this drop-off. We're going to indicate that we did, in fact, drop the person off. We're going to proceed to the next stop, and we see that that will be dropping off AT Customer 2 Test at 9888 or 9988 Genesee Ave. So we'll depart, and we'll see that my gap has been going down quickly. Now I'm just an hour late because I've been flying through my earlier pickups and drop-offs. So now we're going to say that we are arriving for that, and that we dropped the passenger off, and we're ready to proceed to the next stop, which is basically to finish the run back at the garage. So we will depart, and then we will arrive at the garage. And it's going to ask me now to put in a final odometer, and it won't let me end the run until I do. So I'll put my cursor in the odometer, and I'll say, we ended at 675 miles. and end the run. And now for my driver 1, my trips are completed for the day. So just a moment. Okay, so are there any questions besides what we've gone over so far on how that process looks? So hopefully we've tried to make it pretty straightforward in the sense that, you know, on each screen, sometimes you need to enter a little bit of information, but there's not many choices on any given screen. You know, in general, you enter any information that's needed, and then you click a button to, you know, indicate the status or the outcome, and that takes you to the next step in the sequence. So I'm going to grab the screen control back on my main computer right now so that we can go back into the PowerPoint. All right. Okay, so let's see. So let's talk about the different ways that RidePilot and CAD and the driver app will be interacting. So one of those ways is that as the user is, as the driver is filling in changes or completions with the different elements of a run, those will be updated back to RidePilot so that you will be able to see those changes. It's also the case that the AVL will send vehicle location updates to the CAD, and that will be used to actually show the vehicles on the CAD screen. So we'll take a look at that. Let's see. The dispatcher on the dispatcher side can update the manifest, and then that can be sent to the driver app so that the driver will see the changes. And we'll talk about a concept that we've introduced called publishing the manifest. The basic idea for that is that the dispatcher can play around with multiple changes, and those changes won't be streamed in sequence to the driver until the dispatcher says, okay, now I'm done with the set of changes that I make, and now I can publish this. And then, excuse me, then at that point, the driver will see those changes. Earlier, we mentioned that the driver can send an emergency alert to the dispatcher. And then finally, the driver and the dispatcher can chat back and forth. So as we go through this, we're going to jump back and forth a little bit between RidePilot, the main RidePilot application, and the CAD screen, and then the driver app as well. So let's see. So first what I want to do is go over back to the CAD screen. Let's see. What are we looking at here? So we have AT provider, and we have today, and let's unselect these. So we had these couple of runs here, the coastal morning and inland morning. If I do incomplete only, what you'll see is I had done the coastal run and I had done all of the stops and marked it incomplete, so that it no longer appears if I'm only asking to look at the runs that still need to happen today, or if I take a look at all runs, I'll see that. So that's an example of the status of the run being updated via the driver app, and then that informing what's happening and what's being seen over on the RidePilot and CAD side. Now that said, let's see. Let me jump over to here and I'll show you something that may seem a little surprising. Let's see. Well, first we'll go to trips. And so these first two trips here, AT Customer 1 test and AT Customer 2 test, these were the trips that were on that run, and in the process of marking them as having been picked up and then dropped off, their result was updated to completed. So that's another example of seeing how that status is propagating from the driver app into the main RidePilot app. Now, if I go to runs, one of the things that you see here, which is the potential surprise, is that recurring coastal morning run still shows as incomplete, which seems a little bit inconsistent from the CAD. But from the dispatching perspective, it's done. But RidePilot has some sort of formal requirements of a scheduler / dispatcher looking at the run to actually make sure everything is filled out as it should be, and then marking it officially complete using this button. So once a scheduler or dispatcher does that, at this point, now that run will be marked as complete. And I think that Clint, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that's by design to make sure that there's a final quality control check to look at everything at the run and formally mark it as being completed.
That's correct, yeah.
So, hey, Paul, this is Mike over in Tooele. So we've been using this system for a little bit, and my run's autocomplete. Is that not supposed to happen?
Oh, is that right? This you know, then I need to look
Mike, are you
into that.
looking today?
Sorry, Clint?
Sorry, are you looking the next day to go back at your runs?
Oh, yeah, I am. Does it complete overnight then?
Yeah, so if everything is filled out, like your odometer, all your runs are all your trips are complete, it'll auto-complete overnight for you.
Okay, that's typically the case, so that makes sense.
Thanks, Clint. I'd forgotten that, but that's right. It will do that. But in any event, if you do want to show it as complete in the current day, you would go in and mark it like that within the runs screen. Let's see. So let me see if this is showing. So I was going to show the vehicle location, but I think I'll need to log in as a different driver and set up another run to do that. So we won't do that right now. Let's see. Okay, so the next thing I want to show is how RidePilot sends manifest updates to the driver app Ride AVL. So let's see. Let me first off get back to the driver app and log on as a different user. Just a moment here. Moment. Okay, so this is, I was logged in as driver 1. I'm now going to sign out and log in as driver 2. All right, so this is going to show me that I have another run that's queued up for me for the day. So, and incidentally, if drivers have multiple runs for them in the day, you'll see both of them, or you know, however many there are listed in sequence. But let's go ahead and load this. And what I want to note right here is there is a drop-off currently. I'm going to pick up 2 passengers, and then I'm going to drop off those 2 passengers. And the first one is going to go to Escondido, and the second one is going to San Marcos. So we're gonna go in and change the order in the run on the RidePilot scheduling side, and then publish that. And then when we come back, we'll see that those 2 will have reversed themselves. So let me first pull back to the main computer as the controller. Let me share this. All right, and then I will come here to the dispatch screen. See, I'm a little bit behind here. There we go. Okay, so let me do this recurring morning. And so here's the 2 drop-offs that I just mentioned. There's this one that's going to Escondido and this one that's going to San Marcos. And there's a new sign here, this red one, which means publish it. And what I'm basically going to do is drag this to here. And as soon as I've done some changes, then this generally becomes available. And you will have to hit publish before your drivers will be able to see the changes. So I'm going to go ahead and publish that. And it says, it's going to prompt me to make sure that I want to do that. So I'm going to say okay. And then once I've done that, that change should show up over in the driver app. So I want to go back and just confirm that for you guys. So okay, so sorry, just a moment here while I get this. Okay, so you should be seeing the driver app screen again, and you'll see now that it goes San Marcos and then Escondido. So that mirrors the switch that we just did. So basically, whenever you make alterations on the scheduling screen or on the dispatch screen, as soon as you've changed a run in one or more ways, the little red icon will come up to ask if you are ready to publish that. As soon as you press that publish, then then the changes will automatically be updated to the manifest for the driver who's working on that run. Let's see. So, okay. So the next thing that I wanted to show is, let's see, is the emergency alert. So while we are still in this run, I mentioned earlier that you just open up that hamburger menu and then you can click on the emergency, and it's not going to ask for any information other than sending out the emergency alert. So it's like hitting that big red button. And so up top, it will let the user know that it was sent. And then I'm going to jump back to my screen right now. And there you'll see that front and center for the dispatcher that will pop up and let everybody know that they should be, any dispatchers who are using it know that they should be responding to that. Clint, I don't know if you have any comments on your thoughts about how that might, circumstances in which using that might be appropriate and so forth.
I don't have any general comments. I just think that, that's going to be up to each provider on how they want to use that button. If it's going to be kind of a secret or if it's for any kind of emergency, it's really going to be whatever the provider decides is best.
All right, and then once the dispatcher has received it, they can note that it was received, and then I'm just going to jump back again to the app. Let's see, here we go. One moment. Okay, so once the dispatcher has said, acknowledge the emergency alert, it will put a message back to the driver letting them know that they've received it and are going to be taking action on it. Okay, so dismiss that. And then a final interaction to talk about is the chat functionality. So that's another item that you can access from that menu. And let's see, once I bring this up, I can say, let's say good morning. So that will show up now. Let's, at this point, jump over back to the RidePilot side, and we can look at how the interaction works. So to see this, we would be in here. Let's see. Right, just a moment. Okay, so on this side, I'm not sure why it didn't show up in red, but typically the icon will highlight in red on the RidePilot side once a message has been received, and then the user could see that and say, "Oh, let me see what's going on," and they can type in a response. There's nothing showing in this quick response right now, but you have the ability within the system for each provider, they can create a bunch of quick response messages, which could be like, I'm fine, or I found the passenger, or things that could be quickly selected and alleviate the need for either the driver or the dispatcher to type in messages that tend to be pretty common. But in this case, I can just say, hi there, and hit it response, and then so now it just starts an interactive chat back and forth. And I jump back to, the tablet. You'll see that the response from the dispatcher to the driver's message is showing. So it functions as you think it would. So that's much of what I wanted to say regarding the general functionality on the CAD side and also on the AVL side. And the next thing to do is go through some information about different settings. But let me pause and see if there's any questions about the things that we've just gone over. So let me make also one just quick editorial comment, which is that I think there's a lot of cool functionality here, but this is also obviously version 1. So we recognize that there's going to be things that as this gets used, become apparent in terms of ways that it might be further improved. So we encourage you all to take notes and share with us or share with UTA. And you know, this is open source software, so you know, we like to keep track of requests that, you know, can be worked on now or worked on down the road with UTA or down the road with you know, some other agencies who wind up ending the software as well. So we do appreciate any and all sort of feedback about ways to further improve functionality as we have opportunities to do so. Okay, so let me jump back again to, I think we're finally done jumping back and forth. But let me go back to my main computer here, and I'll close this down and come to here. Okay, so let's actually, let me bring this up. Let's talk about the last section, which is some of the settings that you guys will use to configure the CAD and AVL driver app so that it's working in the way that you need it. The first of those is when we started off a run, you'll recall that there were some questions that popped up, such as whether there was gas, whether the I think the signals or the lights were working. So there's two places that those are set. One of those is there can be some system-wide settings that an overall system administrator could enter that then all of the providers could inherit. Additionally, providers can provide their own as well, and it'll end up merging the list of any sort of system-wide input requests and provider-specific input requests. Another thing to note is that the items can be marked as being generally flagged or specifically related to mechanical issues. And there is the ability to generate reports for either flagged items or for mechanical items that you can use. So you'll be able to run a report for a given period and look at basically all the inspection results for either a specific vehicle or for all vehicles, for either flagged or for mechanical fields. We'll take a quick peek at that. You can also specify what some of those common messages for drivers and dispatchers would be. That's the quick messages that you could just select with a button rather than typing in a message. You can also indicate, as I mentioned, whether you're collecting a fare or whether it's a donation, and also whether the driver is being prompted for that, for noting what was collected either at the pickup or at the drop-off of the trip. And then finally, it's worth noting there are some ETA calculation settings that have to do with things like what is considered very late and what is considered way ahead of time. You know, is it 30 minutes? Is it 45 minutes? And so forth. But also things like how long does it take on average to pick up or drop off a passenger, and that can be altered per passenger or per trip as well. But those do have some bearing here because the driver app in particular makes a lot of use of ETA to keep the, update the driver in terms of how they're doing with the pickups and drop-offs relative to the schedule. So we'll just jump over and take a look at some of these really quick. So beginning with the pre-run inspection, as I mentioned, this is one that merges some settings from the system level. So UTA as sort of the system admin could go in and put in some vehicle inspection items. They haven't done so in this user acceptance testing version of the software, or in addition, the provider can go in and do that as well. And if you go to the provider in the general, there's a place where you can get to the lookup tables and select the vehicle inspection questions. And in this case, we see the two that I was walked through answering. Does the car have gas? And is it the case that there are no warning lights? I also mentioned that you can mark these as flagged or mechanical, and when you do so, that will make them available to do reporting on the results. If for a given item, if it's not flagged and it's not mechanical, you can't do any reporting on it. You have to mark it as one or the other or both in order to do reporting. Briefly, just so you know that to get to the reporting, you come here and let's see, where is it? There's the pre-run inspection report, and that lets you, do a date period and then either do all vehicles or a specific vehicle, and then either do a report for flagged items or a report for mechanical items. So that's where you would access that. Okay. Next was common chat items. This is one, again, where there's a system level and a provider level. I'll just show the provider level this time. So if I go to the general and I go back to the lookup tables, and I will see there is a common dispatcher message. There's none that have been entered yet, and common driver messages. And so if you enter some in here, then those will become available in the chat screen such that you can either type a message or select one of those common messages, which would just fill in automatically then. Okay, next is the collect fare donation pre or post trip. This is also a provider setting. And I believe it is the general area. Okay, so here is the fare configuration. You can right here say it's either a donation or a payment. You can also indicate that it's free if that's the case. And in that case, the user, the driver would not be prompted to enter an amount for either a donation or a payment. But if you select either a donation or payment, then in that case, you have to indicate whether the driver should be prompted to enter it when the passenger is picked up or when they're dropped off. That's the pre and post trip respectively. Let's see. And then finally, the last section was the ETA calculation related settings. So, these have previously been used in an earlier version of this to help with the ETA time that's shown on the dispatch screen on the main RidePilot application. But a lot of these are used again within the driver app to update the ETAs as the driver is driving around. So you might have a look at them if you have any curiosity as to what some of the assumptions are behind those settings that are shown in the app. So for example, 15 minutes is the current value for what constitutes a very late arrival. So if the driver's app is thinking that based on where the vehicle is and using the navigation information, getting an estimate of the next arrival time, if that's 15 minutes or more later than whatever the scheduled was, that means it's going to show it in red. Okay, so I think that wraps up what we wanted to go through. We will have a recording of this available, but we can go through any additional questions that y'all might have right now as well, if there are any.
So just to let the group know, I was unable to find where we can find the notes that a driver would put in during the pre-run inspection. I've already sent an email off to Zhudong, the developer, to see if we can figure out where that's supposed to be. There is a workaround though. If you are on the app and it's the same day, you can actually log in as the driver on the app and go back to the pre-trip inspection or pre-run inspection, excuse me, and see what notes they put in there. It's a little bit cumbersome, but that is the workaround for the time being.
Yeah, and Clint, I would say that if we find that there's actually not some place within RidePilot where you can see that, we'll make sure that we add a place for it, because that should be there, obviously.
Right.
All right. Do we have any other questions or comments right now?
So I apologize. I missed the first couple minutes of the meeting. Do you guys go over the prior path subsection of the map on the CAD?
We did. Let me go back and we can show that real quick. I'll just let's see. I need to use 12 for that because we need some actual prior path data. So we can actually let me.
Well, I was just curious to know if there was like
it's not better, Mike.
It's not better. Okay. Is there a timeline on that?
That's something we're still looking into because it's really difficult based off of the geo points. At least that's the information I get from Judong. I don't know if Paul has any additional answers, but
No, I don't have any updates on that, but I'll follow up with Judong as well. It's possible we can just turn on more frequent updating. There's sort of a data cost to that, but if that's what needs to happen to make it, be more realistic recreation of the routes that were followed, that might be what needs to happen.
Okay. And then I guess one other thing on this, on the current paths, I guess you'd call it. What does it say?
Upcoming path?
That's the one. When you're viewing multiple paths, this is just a food for thought. Would there be a way to better distinguish them? Because if you select multiple runs with an upcoming path, they're all the same color and they all use the same scheme. So if you wanted to quickly differentiate between them, it's kind of hard to do so.
I feel your pain. I agree that that's something to improve. My suspicion is that will be one of a handful of things that in use proves to be sufficiently painful that we go in and figure out a way to make that work a little bit better. But
okay.
at present we have not yet implemented something like that.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, I would say that the best, current workaround is to just only show one route at a time. Thank you, everybody. Go ahead.
This is Kelly Bowers. I download the app on my phone, and it's not logging in. Is it active? It just tells me to try again.
As far
as
I
should
know,
be working.
I actually had kind of a similar question. So when I go into RidePilot on my desktop and I look at the CAD tab, I've gone back to previous days and I'm not seeing any runs. It doesn't list any runs, even though I know we've had runs. Is there an extra step I'm missing?
Yes, if you haven't pushed the publish manifest button on the run, it won't show up in the CAD AVL screen.
Okay.
Okay, so any idea on fixing on the app being able to sign in? I have the right username and password because I signed in on the computer.
Let me check for you.
are you a driver? Is there a driver?
Not a driver. I'm actually. I guess you would call me a dispatcher.
Okay, so I believe it's the case that you need to be a driver and have that driver associated with a user. And then if that's the case, it will be able to find runs that you're assigned to do. And if there's not a driver record for your provider that links to your username, then I think that might be what is causing the problem. So what you could do is go in and make yourself a driver and then associate that driver with your user account. And at that point, it would probably open up for you, but not have any runs showing unless you had assigned yourself to drive a run.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, give that a whirl, and if that's not doing it, we can troubleshoot a little further. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your attention and for the good questions. And you know, obviously, feel free to keep sending us questions as we go, or route them through Clint. And you know, working with Clint, we'll together figure them out and make sure everybody's getting answers and able to make productive use of this.
So I just want to thank Paul for the training, and like you said, if anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to send them to me, and if I can't answer them, I'll pass them along to Paul and Judong. So again, thank you everybody for coming. It looks like we got done quite a bit early, which is awesome. So thanks. Everybody have a good day and a good weekend.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks.